speaker is Nino from the Answer Coalition.
Peace, how y'all doing? My name is Nino Brown. I'm an organizer with the Answer Coalition. The Answer Coalition stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. It was formed in the wake of 9/11. Raise your hand if you remember 9/11, if you were alive. I was just talking with a friend who said they weren't even alive when 9/11 happened, and that they were in middle school when the United States, through Nato, bombed Libya, right? The most prosperous African nation. It was then bombed into a state of chattel slavery again, right? One of NATO's victims. So I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Answer Coalition and to speak some necessary truths, right? Because after 9/11 there was mass pandemonium, right? It wasn't easy to come out against war, right? The United States was just attacked. About 3,000 people died. Right? We were isolated as the anti-war movement. People said you can't speak out against war. So I want to thank you all now for coming out, right, and speaking out against this war that is on the horizon, right? Because what we have to do is not just question why our country is careening towards war with Russia, right? But every other year it seems like it's careening towards war with Venezuela, with China, right? Getting embroiled in Israel and Palestine. Right? Drumming up war against Nicaragua and other countries, Iran. It was only 2 years ago that Donald Trump assassinated a military leader. Qasem Soleimani almost sent us on the brink of World War III. Right? So I also want to talk about the fact that Answer Coalition stands for Act Now to Stop War and End Racism. Racism is connected to war inextricably. Right? You cannot have war without racism. This country loves to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? But before he died in 1968, he said, I can't stand up against war in Vietnam without talking about the violence of my own country. So I'm here to talk about the violence of America because we're in America. I'm not in Russia, right? The Russian people have been protesting against the war. They've been doing their part. It's time for us to do our part. So in order for us to fight war, we have to fight the racism that we see in this country, but the racism that we see in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine, as we see African students being denied refugee status, right? We see media spokespeople saying, well, who would have thought that this would have happened in civilized Europe, right? Let me tell you about something about European civilization. I haven't seen it. Where is it at? What type of civilization has 140 million people in poverty or near poverty, right? Joe Biden just increased the money that they're going to send to the Ukrainian army from 4 billion to 10 billion. Every single year we see our military budget go up. I was a public school teacher in Boston Public Schools. Now I'm a community organizer. Shout out to Boston Public Schools, right? And I've had students who are homeless. And I've been told that Massachusetts has some of the best schools in the world, right? So we have to talk about racism. We have to connect all these issues together. But we also have to talk about why war even exists in the first place. War exists because you have a system called capitalism, where each nation state seeks to build up its industry, right? Seeks to go beyond its borders when its capital gets too big, so that it needs to expand its markets and take over the world. We saw that with World War I. People talk about multipolarity. Let me tell you about multipolarity. The multiple poles that existed led to World War I. And then there were two poles, the Soviet Union and the United States. And after the Soviet Union fell, then there was one pole, the United States of America. And through the United States of America and its military united front of NATO, it has destroyed a country called Yugoslavia. You cannot even find it on a map anymore, right? That is a war crime. So now we see these politicians, they have the vernacular, they have the rhetoric, they know what a war crime is, they know how to slap sanctions on people for committing war crimes. Well, Bush is still painting pictures, Obama is still a free person, Trump is still a free person. We have war criminals for the last 40 or so presidents. Right? The United States was a country that was born in war. The War of 1812, the Spanish-American War, the First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, which was not cold at all, it was hot. Because if you were an African person, if you were an Asian person, if you were a Latin American person, it wasn't a Cold War. It was Contras in Nicaragua. So I'm thanking y'all for coming out today to not just talk about Ukraine, but Palestine, Yemen, Somalia, places that are being bombed every day, but no one gives a damn because it's black and brown people, right? So don't just selectively say, oh, now I'm against the war because white folks are dying. But also let me tell you, since 2014, when the United States supported a coup in Ukraine to get rid of a corrupt president, but a democratically elected, corrupt, neutral president, that coup government has led a war against Eastern Ukraine, and 14,000 people have been dying. Right? It wasn't just that, people started dying 2 weeks ago when Russia invaded. People were dying in the droves before that. So you need to think about what your media is telling you when this started. Because if you don't know your history, they can come up to you and say, hey, wow, this thing just happened and it's crazy. There's no context. Don't worry about the context. You need to be worried about the context. Because we just got out of Afghanistan for 20 years. What happened there? Did we solve any problems? Not at all. So when they say more war, we say no war. Right? In order to fight for a war without war, we need a system based on collaboration, not competition. Negotiation, not escalation. Right? We need a system that is called socialism. Right? Because capitalism needs war to profit. Right? I didn't benefit from this war, but Raytheon did. Lockheed Martin did. Nancy Pelosi and all the politicians who have stocks in these military industries, they benefit. But do the American people benefit? No, not one single bit. Do the Russian people benefit? No, not one single bit. Right? So I want to end by saying, if you look at the monument up here to the brave African Americans who freed themselves during slavery, when people say we have to focus on Putin, you can talk about Putin if you want. I choose not to because it doesn't matter. It could be Putin, it could be Luton, Putin, it doesn't matter. Right? It's a system that leads us to war. Right? It doesn't matter who's there. Because it wasn't Abraham Lincoln that freed the slaves. It was 180,000 black men who picked up guns and freed themselves. Right? So it's going to be the American people that free ourselves from this war hysteria. Nobody else. Not Biden, not Putin, not the United Nations, but the American people had to stand up to their government and say, we don't want war, we want peace. And if we want peace, we're going to struggle for it. So all power to the people. Happy Women's History Month. Shout out to Angela Davis and all the women who stand up for peace. Right? Cindy Sheehan and all of them. And thank you so much. My name is Nino Brown from the Anti Coalition, and peace, y'all. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nino.